Family reunion. My parents gave my son a pen while his cousins got phones, cash and headphones. He looked at me with wet eyes. Why don't they love me? Dad said, because they're proper grandchildren. I just got up, grabbed my coat and left. The next day what they found in their mailbox made them show up on my porch in tears. At the family reunion last weekend, my parents gave my son a pen while his cousins got iPhones, headphones and envelopes full of cash. That's the moment something inside me turned cold. We'd been invited like everyone else. The usual group text from my mom, chirpy and formal, calling it our annual heritage celebration, like we were royalty or something. Bring a dish, dress nicely, no plus ones unless approved. My siblings never had to follow that last rule. Just me. We arrived at noon. The driveway was packed with shiny cars. Dan's new Range Rover, Carla's Tesla, both parked like centerpieces. My Corolla didn't belong there. I caught Eli peeking out the window at all the people before he unbuckled. He was quiet. That was rare for him. The backyard looked staged. There were rented chairs, those big white tents strung with lights, even a speaker system playing soft jazz. My mother always did this thing where she made everything look expensive without actually spending much. I walked in holding my casserole and trying not to feel 17 again. No one noticed we'd arrived. Dan was at the grill like he was king of the world. Carla was holding court with a group of aunts talking about her new consulting job. My mom waved briefly, then went back to whatever she was doing with a clipboard. We found seats in the corner. Eli wanted to go say hi to the cousins, but they were already chasing each other around, laughing about some inside joke too fast to catch. After the meal, which was long and included an unsolicited speech from Dan about financial discipline, my dad stood up and clapped for attention. We want to show our appreciation for our amazing grandkids, he said. That's when they brought out the gifts. Each one was handed over with a smile and a little comment. Dan's oldest got an iPhone 15 Pro. My dad actually said he'd earned it for being a young man with potential. Carla's daughter got $500 in an envelope and a pair of Bose headphones. Her youngest, who's 4 and still can't read, got a kid's tablet and a Target gift card. Even the more distant cousins, kids I barely remembered, got something flashy. They saved Eli for last. My mother reached into her purse and took out a tiny cardboard box. She walked over and handed it to him without bending down or saying anything. Eli looked confused but opened it anyway. Inside was a pen. Not in packaging. No logo. Just a cheap, gold-colored pen. It rattled when he picked it up. He turned to me. His voice was small. Why don't they love me? I couldn't answer. I didn't have anything kind or clean to say. And then my dad chuckled. Because they're the right grandkids. It was like getting slapped, except nobody flinched. Everyone just kept standing there. No gasps. No shocked silence. Just more smiles, like what he said made perfect sense. I stood up slowly. Took Eli's hand. Didn't touch the casserole we brought. Didn't say goodbye. We walked out. Got in the car. Drove in silence for 2 hours. That night Eli went to bed early. He didn't ask me to read to him like he usually does. He just said goodnight and pulled the covers up. I sat at the kitchen table until past midnight, looking at my phone, then at my laptop, then back again. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just remembered. Everything. The way my parents used to forget my birthday. How Dan was always the achiever, and Carla was our only daughter, as if I didn't exist. How they skipped my college graduation to go on a cruise. How they never visited after I had Eli. I'd accepted it for years. Convinced myself they were just old-fashioned or didn't realize how obvious it was. But the pen made it real. It made it public. The next morning I made 3 calls. One to a lawyer I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. One to my aunt in Arizona, who still had the original copies of some paperwork my parents hoped were forgotten. And one to a former neighbor who owed me a favor. By noon, a letter had been written, signed, and hand-delivered to their mailbox by a courier I paid out of pocket. It wasn't dramatic. Didn't need to be. It was clear. By 6 they were on my doorstep. And they were crying. They knocked twice. Not loud. Not impatient. Just soft taps like they were hoping I wouldn't hear. Eli was in his room building something with his Legos. I stood in the kitchen watching the shadow through the curtain on the front door. 2 figures. My parents. I didn't open it. They stayed out there for a few minutes. I heard whispers, then silence, then another knock. My mother's voice, "Sandy, please. Just for a second." I let them wait. When they finally gave up and left, I checked the camera feed on my phone. My dad looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. My mom was holding the envelope in both hands like it was poison. Inside that envelope was a notice of intent. I had filed to challenge their handling of my grandfather's estate. My grandfather, the only one who ever treated me like I mattered, had left behind a trust. It wasn't massive, but it was solid. The money was meant to be split between his grandchildren. Not just Dan's and Carla's kids. Mine too. But my parents were the trustees. They'd quietly amended things after his death, restructured the trust, moved assets, made gifts out of accounts he'd intended to remain untouched. They used legal loopholes and technicalities to funnel everything to Dan and Carla's side. I had never asked for any of it. Not once. I didn't even know the details until a few months ago when I started digging after overhearing something at a cousin's wedding. I let it go at the time. I told myself it didn't matter. But after the pen, I saw it clearly for what it was. Not just neglect. Not just favoritism. Cruelty. I wasn't going after them for money. I didn't need their approval. But I was going to make sure they never got to rewrite history like they always tried to. I was going to drag it into the light with documentation. I had all the bank statements, the original trust paperwork, the emails they thought no one kept. I hired a forensic accountant. I gave power of attorney to the lawyer. I wasn't bluffing. The next day my mom called me 4 times. Left voicemails. Long ones. I didn't listen. Then my dad emailed me, something he hadn't done in years. Please don't do this. We can talk. That evening Eli asked why Grandma and Grandpa were mad. I told him they weren't mad. They were just uncomfortable because someone finally told them the truth. He nodded and went back to his Legos. I didn't tell him what else I was doing. That I had also filed a formal complaint with the family foundation my parents chaired. The one they used to build their reputation around town. The one that conveniently forgot to list certain distributions on its public disclosures. They wanted to play legacy games. Fine. I'd show them what legacies are built on. Not fake smiles and glittering gifts, but accountability. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. And I wasn't done. To be continued in part 3. By the end of that week the cracks were showing. Dan called me first. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year. He never bothered with birthdays or holidays, never even texted when Eli was in the hospital for 2 days last winter. But suddenly he had time. He opened with small talk. How was I? How was Eli? He asked if I'd gotten new tires on the Corolla yet. I let him circle around it for a while before he finally got to the point. What exactly are you trying to do here? I told him the truth. I was just asking for what was supposed to be ours. For what Grandpa actually wanted. Dan said I was overreacting. That I was dragging up things that didn't need to be public. That my parents were old and had made some unofficial choices because they thought it was best. Best for who? I asked. He didn't answer. Later that day my lawyer forwarded me a letter from their attorney. A quiet attempt at resolution. A proposed settlement. A small payout. Tiny really, with a line at the bottom about signing a full release, no further action, no media, no escalation. I didn't even blink. I told my lawyer to reject it. I wasn't after a payout. I wanted it documented. I wanted it filed. I wanted the trust reopened. I wanted their signatures in court records with a judge present. By the weekend Carla called too. Unlike Dan, she skipped the pleasantries. She went straight into it. Said I was tearing the family apart. Said Eli wouldn't benefit from all this ugliness. Said I needed to think long term. You know how they are, she said. They've always been like this. You're not going to change them. I told her she was right. I wasn't trying to change them. I was finally done pretending it didn't matter. She hung up. The next few days were quiet. No calls. No emails. I thought maybe they were regrouping, trying to come up with some strategy. I pictured long calls between Dan and Carla. Maybe even emergency meetings over wine at my parents' house. But then something strange happened. On Wednesday I got a text from my aunt in Arizona. Did you send your parents that binder? I didn't know what she was talking about. He sent me a photo. It was a thick manila folder filled with old letters, photographs, and copies of journals. All handwritten. They were from my grandfather. And in them, page after page, he had written about me. About how proud he was. How he wished he'd done more to protect me from the way I was treated. How he saw what was happening and tried to intervene but got pushed aside. In one letter, dated a few months before he passed, he wrote, "If anything happens to me, I hope Sandy someday knows that I tried. I tried to leave something behind for her and her son. I fear the others won't honor it. I hadn't sent it. Someone else had. I still don't know who. But once my parents saw it, the tone shifted. That night they came back to my door. This time not just crying, shaking. They weren't there to apologize. They were there because they knew I had the truth now, and that I wasn't going to bury it. They stood on my porch for almost 10 minutes before I opened the door. This time I let them wait. I wanted them to taste the taste of silence. When I finally came out, my mother looked a little smaller. My dad didn't speak right away. He was holding a folder, one I recognized immediately. My grandfather's handwriting on the cover, thick black ink. "So you knew about this?" I asked. Neither of them answered. My mom blinked rapidly as if that would stop whatever was happening. My dad opened his mouth, then closed it. I didn't invite them in. I let them stand outside the way they used to let me stand alone in a crowd of relatives when I was a kid, holding my own birthday card with no money while my siblings opened their presents. I told them the lawyer had everything now. Folder. The trust documents. Their corrected signatures. Checks they wrote out of the estate account marked consulting fees. "This is all going to court," I said. That's when my mom broke down. She begged me. She said it would destroy the family. That people would say. That I would destroy everything they had built. I told her I wasn't destroying anything. I was just showing everyone what they had built it on. They left without another word. That night I sat on the back porch while Eli slept and watched the wind rustle through the trees. I kept thinking about all the years I had spent trying to earn a shred of their affection, trying to justify why they had forgotten me, why Eli never got any cards, why I was the only one not invited to the cabin for Christmas. And I realized something I had never dared to say out loud before. They knew exactly what they were doing. Everything. The next morning the story was out. Not because I went to the press, because someone else did. A local reporter had obtained a copy of the complaint through the court records. My parents were not just trustees of a family trust. They were minor public figures in town, heads of a foundation that gave out scholarships and organized charity golf tournaments. Their names were on plaques in the library, in the school auditorium, even at the local animal shelter. Now their names were in the headlines too. Trust mismanagement blamed on community leaders. Grandson of late World War II veteran accuses family of real estate fraud. I didn't know the reporter. I didn't expect this. But I didn't stop it. The fallout began within hours. Donors pulled out of the foundation. A planned fundraiser was canceled. One of their old friends publicly resigned from the board of directors. Dan called again, this time furious. He said I'd gone too far. He said I was making fun of our family. I told him we were already a joke. I was just tired of pretending I didn't get the climax. That weekend, Carla showed up at my door. Alone. Unannounced. She didn't even knock, she just waited outside until I spotted her through the window. She looked exhausted. She asked if we could talk. I let her sit on the porch. This time she didn't defend them. She didn't yell. She just said quietly, "You should never have resisted." I didn't say anything. Because she was right. They built an entire system around the belief that I would remain silent forever. They never expected me to fight. They certainly didn't expect me to win. After the article hit the web, changes began to happen not just at the foundation or the city but also in the family. A few cousins I hadn't heard from in years quietly started to reach out. A few friends liked the post when it went viral on Facebook. One of Carla's girlfriends wrote me a private message. I've always wondered why Eli was treated differently. Sorry, but who was the most important? Dan, Carla, my parents? They started to close in like animals in a burning house. First there were more calls. I ignored them. Then emails from their lawyer, increasingly panicked. They offered more money, now more than anything Eli would ever be entitled to. 6 figures. A clean settlement. A confidential settlement. They called it an opportunity to move forward. I responded in 2 words. No deal. Because now it wasn't just about trust. It was about the decades I'd spent pretending they weren't tearing me apart moment by moment. It was about the years they'd treated my son as if he were invisible, as if his existence was some kind of paperwork error they couldn't fix. And it was about that pen. That stupid plastic pen. It had become a symbol of everything they thought I would accept. But now the story had substance. A local podcast picked it up. Then a regional news station ran a story, told with quiet indignation and archival footage of my father smiling on the podium at a scholarship ceremony 5 years ago. They couldn't hide anymore. Carla wrote me a personal email. Not to apologize. To ask if I was willing to even think about Eli's future before dragging it out any further. I didn't answer. Because here's what no one seemed to understand. I was thinking about his future. I was thinking about the day he was old enough to ask me why I never stood up for him. Why I let them treat us like the last page of a photo album they never opened. Trust isn't everything. I quietly filed 2 more lawsuits. A formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office about financial misrepresentation in the Foundation's records. A request for a judicial review of the Foundation's charitable giving over the past 7 years. It wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure no other wrong kid got a cheap pen and the right ones walked away with the gold. My lawyer called and told me that based on the response, it looked like we were going to go to court. My parents hadn't agreed to mediation. They were going to fight. I guess they were hoping I would back down when things got expensive and messy. But I wasn't afraid of the mess anymore. And then something happened that I didn't expect. One morning, about 2 weeks after it all started, I got a letter in the mail. Uncertified. No tracking. Just regular mail. No return address. But the handwriting? I recognized it right away. It was my dad's letter. I opened it at the kitchen counter while Eli was eating cereal. It was short. No excuses. No denials. Just a list of things he remembered. The time I fell off my bike and he didn't show up. The time he skipped my high school graduation dinner to take Dan to a golf tournament. The time I asked for help when Eli was born and he said they were traveling too much to come visit. Then the last line. We can't fix this. But we never thought you'd actually leave. That's when I understood. This wasn't just a power transition. This was a funeral. And they finally realized what part of me had been ignoring them for years. It was gone. They could knock on my door all they wanted. But there was nothing left inside that they could reach. The court date was set for late fall. My lawyer said it would probably settle before then, but I told him I didn't care. I was prepared to see it through even if it took years. Meanwhile, the foundation quietly shut down. They posted a vague statement on their website about internal restructuring and family health priorities. But everyone knew. The donors pulled out. The board dissolved. They took their name off the scholarships. Dan stopped calling. Carla unfriended me on everything. My mom tried once more. She sent a box of old family photos to my house, mostly of me as a baby with a sticky note that said, "We did love you." I didn't open it. I donated the box. Because now finally I didn't need proof. Eli stopped asking about them too. He adjusted faster than I thought he would. He still had questions sometimes, like why his cousins had iPhones and he didn't, but I started telling him the truth in simple ways. Not everyone whose family acts like it. Not everyone deserves access to your life. The last time I saw them was in court. They sat across the room from me, stiff and gray, trying not to make eye contact. They looked like strangers who used to live in the same town I grew up in. Not parents. Not blood. Just 2 people who never thought the silence would turn on them. The judge ordered a review of the trust. A full audit. They called it a win for both sides. But I knew what it really was. A record. A permanent one. A few months after the hearing, I got an official letter from the trustee's office. The court had ruled that Eli was entitled to his share. The amended changes were invalid. The funds would be redistributed. A new manager had been appointed. My parents were removed. They never reached out again. No letters. No apologies. No let's fix this. And I never opened the door again. Some nights I still think about that reunion. The gift table. The laughter. The moment Eli turned and looked at me with tears in his eyes. Why don't they love me? He never asked it again. Because now he doesn't need the answer. Now he has something better. Me. Not perfect. Not rich. Not surrounded by people clapping for the wrong reasons. But present. And that's something no trust fund and no gold pen could ever buy.